Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Age Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 16 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're talking about all things related to the tight end position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. After that, before we get into our top 16 tight end rankings, I wanted to talk about a couple players that are potentially going to be missing this upcoming weekend's game. Of course, based on injury, the circumstance of that team. Is there another player that you could pick up on that roster? And if so, who would that be? We'll mention a couple players going into this upcoming weekend. After that, we'll talk about my top 16 tight end rankings for a half PPR scoring format. Again, rankings are always subject to change. It is only Thursday. There are a couple of days until these games actually go upon the way and start progressing. But as of right now, there are a couple players that are on that fringe. Are they going to play? Are they going to be limited? We'll have to wait and see. If you're trying to stay up to date, make sure you show up this upcoming Saturday and Sunday morning. We're going to do 2 live streams from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, both on this upcoming Saturday and Sunday mornings. For those of you who are interested, trying to get your lineup set, we will have a Friday game, but 3 Saturday games. So for those of you who are trying to get all of your updated rankings regarding that, you can check us out 8 a.m., 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on the channel. We'll be good to go. After that, I think we're all set. I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all of you. Again, this is going to be a pretty exciting weekend, trying to capture some fantasy football championships, to say the very least. For those of you who have a championship next week, I'll see you then. But either way, I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, subscribing, helping us get here, making 2020 a very memorable, entire season. To be honest, prior to the season starting, wasn't a great year for me, but hey, you guys are really helping me out a lot. I appreciate everything going on and all the support, whether it's here on YouTube, over the Discord channel, or on Patreon. Thank you very much, guys. All right, let's get into this, shall we? Of course, we want to talk about matchups, but let's be honest. We've talked about matchups for 15 straight weeks, and nothing has really changed. The New York Jets, of course, are giving up a lot of points, but the thing that I wanted to point out first and foremost is, of course, the fact that even though the Chicago Bears, the Cleveland Browns, the Buffalo Bills, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're giving up a lot of points to opposing tight ends this season, there aren't tight ends on those teams that I feel comfortable enough starting this week. Therefore, we can throw this right out the window because sure, the Jets, they play against Austin Hooper. He's a good play. The Atlanta Falcons, giving up the 5th most points, playing against Travis Kelce. The rich get richer at this point, I think. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're getting to play against, TJ Hockenson. Great. He's already a stud tight end. You go ahead and fire him up anyway, even though he's coming off of a disappointing performance. We have a lot of good tight ends that are going to be potentially in already advantageous spots. But either way, you're starting your studs. I wanted to also cover some of the tougher matchups at the position. Of course, we know that typically you don't want to start tight ends against Pittsburgh, San Francisco, the New England Patriots. But with that being said, we've seen tight ends over the last couple weeks produce against these teams. Specifically, we've seen Logan Thomas produce against both the Steelers and the 49ers. We've seen Dalton Schultz recently this past weekend score against the 49ers. We've seen players, regardless of the matchup, be able to find success. And that's the entire point. You want to start your stud regardless of the matchup. I know typically you don't want to play against Bill Belichick if you're a tight end, but we've even seen Mark Andrews come out of a game in which he had over 10 fantasy points. So again, it's always a possibility. We're just going to have to play our studs and get everything set to go this week. Now, before we begin talking about my top 16 tight end rankings on the week, I wanted to mention a couple injuries to players. Hunter Henry, tight end of the Los Angeles Chargers, will be missing this week's game. Take him out of your lineup. He is going to be missing. So after that is, kind of settled out, is there another tight end on the Los Angeles Chargers that I'm interested in? I know Darnold Parham is probably going to be the guy there. He's a former XFL player. I don't think that he is a start in any capacity. I'd rather go with any of the other guys that are on our top 16 list. So again, try to pivot accordingly. Hopefully somebody I mentioned today is available. Outside of that, Jonnu Smith has missed the last 2 practices, Wednesday and Thursday of this week. He's probably going to be on track to potentially miss this week once again. Again, he's been really banged up with injuries in the second half of the season, really hasn't found stability there, and has really hurt himself in terms of overall fantasy value in comparison to the beginning of the season. So as of right now, Jonnu Smith's a guy that you might want to look to pivot away from if in fact he is in your starting lineup. Just keep your eyes open for potential other options to pick up. All right, now that we've covered that, let's get into our top 16 tight end rankings. Again, we're starting our studs, and we're going through this relatively quickly, beginning off with our number 1, Travis Kelce. Of course, Travis Kelce has been the stud, number 1 tight end, and has really been all that you could potentially ask for. Coming off of an 18.8 fantasy point performance in a half PPR scoring format, you really can't ask for more. Playing against the 50 easiest matchup at the tight end position, beautiful. The only thing that I wanted to mention before we move on from Travis Kelce as our number 1 tight end, as he typically is every single week, is the fact that This season already, he has put up 240 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. His best statistical season in terms of fantasy ever was 2018, in which he had 243 fantasy points. He's only, I think, less than 3 points away from surpassing his greatest season ever as a tight end in the National Football League. So then I thought to myself, okay, he's got 2 games, easily can surpass 3 points with that. But let's go look at some of the other greatest performances of all time at the tight end position. Specifically, Rob Gronkowski in 2011 had 286 fantasy points. Imagine that, he had 17 touchdowns. Unfortunately, Kelce's not going to catch that, but a guy that he's eligible to catch potentially is Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham's 2013 season had a total of 260 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Very capable in catching that. Again, a lot of touchdowns are required. Already has 10 plus this season, and he's not slowing down anytime soon. If he doesn't play in week 17, it's going to be tough for him to catch them. But regardless, I 100% think Travis Kelce's an animal and one of the best tight ends of all time, to say the very least, specifically for fantasy. We have Darren Waller as our number 2 tight end. Again, Darren Waller is just an animal. Even with Marcus Mariota, he was unstoppable this past week against the Los Angeles Chargers. 9 catches, 150 receiving yards, and a touchdown. This is just a couple weeks back from having 200, receiving yards and 2 touchdowns on 13 catches against the Jets. I mean, Darren Waller is just unstoppable as of this season. And to be honest, he's done everything that he did last year and even more. I mean, the fact that he has more targets, more receptions, more touchdowns already this season than he did last year, it's unbelievable. We love to see it, absolutely. In terms of overall fantasy points, he's already surpassed everything he accomplished last season. He's only getting better. Playing against the Miami Dolphins, even though it is a tougher matchup, to say the very least, we've seen stud tight ends produce against them. That is what Darren Waller is. We saw Kelce a couple weeks back go for 8 catches, 136, and a touchdown. I certainly think that because Derek Carr is healthy and ready to go, regardless of who's playing quarterback, I think Darren Waller is an awesome play, to say the very least, and a guy that honestly is never coming out of the lineup. We have Mark Andrews as our number 3 tight end. Coming off of a game of 5 catches on 5 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown, that was a one-sided affair. It didn't require Mark Andrews to be in the game the entire time. Playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's not something that's very competitive. Great. We'll take a 15-point performance in 3 quarters. No problem. But this upcoming week, they play against the New York Giants. Just recently, the New York Giants, they've given up their fair share of points to tight ends. Austin Hooper's coming off of a game of 5 catches, 41 yards and a touchdown. And Dan Arnold the week prior, 2 catches, 27 yards and a touchdown. The tight end position has found a lot of success down in the red zone against this New York Giants defense. And to be honest, I think Lamar Jackson, who has been heating up over the last couple weeks, has scored 3 touchdowns on average each of the last 3 games, has continued to find himself success down in the red zone, scoring a lot, and finding his number 1 target, Mark Andrews. I think they're definitely going to connect this week, and for sure is another tight end that is auto-playing this week. We move on to our number 4, Robert Tonyan. So, this Green Bay tight end has absolutely destroyed any expectation of what we had at the tight end position from this team. Prior to the season beginning, we all thought Jay Sternberger was going to be the guy. And even then, Aaron Rodgers never used the tight end position. But we know Matt LaFleur always liked to use that in Tennessee. He brought it over, and that is what they implemented this year. There's a reason why Robert Tonyan has already passed 10 receiving touchdowns. There's a reason why he has had a receiving touchdown in 5 consecutive games, and the streak continues into this week. Playing against the Tennessee Titans, that's one of the easiest matchups at the position. Of course, they've given up a lot of points to the tight end position in just the last couple of years in general. They have always been in this conversation of just giving up a ton of points. Robert Tonyan's in a fantastic spot as another stud play at the tight end position. We move on to TJ Hockenson. Again, another one of these guys that has found a lot of consistency at the position, even though he is coming off of a little bit of a rough week with Matthew Stafford just really not getting him the ball and giving him enough opportunity. He luckily plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who as of the last couple of weeks have desperately been struggling against tight ends. Specifically, it all started with that Travis Kelce performance, 8 catches, 82 yards. Then it started to snowball. We had Irv Smith the following week, 4 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown. Then recently, Hayden Hurst this past week, 4 catches, 21 and a touchdown. We have seen tight ends produce against this team. They're continuing to produce all season long. And I think TJ Hockenson, who as of right now is the number 2 target behind Marvin Jones and has been a consistent part of this offense, should be a fantastic play this week. George Kittle is my number 6. Now, if in fact George Kittle plays, I have him at 6 because I do think that these other stud tight ends have proven enough all season long to get the automatic start. And the question is, what are we going to see from George Kittle? Are we going to see a little bit of a limited play? Is he going to get a full rep? If he's full go and practices fully this entire week, because I haven't seen the practice report as of today, Thursday. If he practices fully today and tomorrow, and they let him go this upcoming, I think they play on Saturday against the Arizona Cardinals. If they let him full go regardless of who's at quarterback, whether it's CJ Beathard or, whatever it ends up being. I'm 100% okay with starting him over any of the other guys that I'm going to mention on today's video. Again, let's not forget what George Kittle is. He is one of the best, if not the best tight end in the National Football League. In terms of fantasy production as a receiving option, he is an absolute animal. I mean, thinking about the receiving options on that team, you have Brandon Ayuk, and then you got Kendrick Bourne. That's a pretty good drop-off. It would be great to see those targets that go to Kendrick Bourne, 8 to 10, go in the direction of George Kittle. Find him a lot of success this week in a matchup in which he's very comfortable with. I think George Kittle is a fantastic play, certainly. Moving on to our number 7 tight end for this week, it is Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. Logan Thomas has come out strong as of late. I mean, just this past week, we all thought, okay, Alex Smith is going to be out. Are we going to see any sort of productivity from him with Dwayne Haskins back in the lineup? And boy, did we see it. 15 targets, 13 receptions, 101 receiving yards against the Seattle Seahawks. My goodness, did Logan Thomas take over. He had 16.6 fantasy points. He's been the number 3 overall tight end in just the last 3 weeks. Plays against the Carolina Panthers. Guys, the Carolina Panthers cannot stop tight ends. They cannot do it to save their life. Robert Tonyan scored a touchdown last week. Nick Vannett the week prior to that. Kyle Rudolph, 7 catches, 68 yards. Hockenson, 4 catches, 68 yards. The Bucs duo of Gronk and Cameron Brate, 5 catches, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 10 catches, 159. That's not even it. That's just 6 performances, and there's literally 8 more that I could mention this year. And going back into last year, that Carolina just could not stop tight ends. 100%, it has just been a consistent factor. I think the usage of Logan Thomas recently and his ability to score, whether it was against Pittsburgh, against the 49ers, and or this past week against Seattle, scoring fantasy points has come easy to him in the last 3 weeks, and we're absolutely going to be firing him up as a stud tight end going forward. Moving on to our number 8 tight end, we have Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. So, speaking of tight ends that have been strong and hot as of late, my goodness, Mike Gesicki's been unbelievable. In the last 3 games that he has played, he's not only had 16 catches, $188 in the receiving yard game, and 4 receiving touchdowns. He's averaging 16.93 fantasy points in the last 3 games with Tua as the quarterback. So that in itself gives me even more confidence. The fact that he plays against the Las Vegas Raiders this week, who again, Hunter Henry had himself a pretty good week last week, 5 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown. I really do think that if Mike Gesicki is the guy that is starting this week, I know he's dealing with a shoulder injury. If he's healthy and ready to go, I'm 100% firing him up because I know his kind of utilization in this offense with how many injuries they've had to the receiving options of this team, with Devontae Parker still being questionable, with Jakeem Grant out. There honestly seems to be nobody to throw the ball to. If Gesicki's active, he's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to find a lot of production. He's my number 8 on the week there. We have number 9, Austin Hooper. I mentioned it before. The New York Jets cannot stop a soul in the passing game. It is a fact. Just talking about how many points they've given up. They've given up a receiving touchdown to opposing tight ends in 6 consecutive games. Higbee, 4 catches, 67 and a touchdown. Will Disley, 2 catches, 23 and a touchdown. Waller, 13, 202. The Dolphins duo had 3 catches, 42 and a touchdown, one of them being Gesicki. Hunter Henry playing against them, 4 catches, 48 and a touchdown. They cannot stop tight ends. They just can't. It is a fact. And Austin Hooper coming off of a game in which he's just scored a touchdown against the New York Giants just gives me even more confidence to fire him up in this matchup. It just seems to me that everyone could score against them, and Hooper is definitely going to be able to do so this week. Noah Fant is our number 10. So finally, he found himself a pretty good week. This was the first time in quite some time that he had gotten a good amount of opportunity and or points, coming off of a performance in which he had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 68 yards and a touchdown against the Buffalo Bills secondary. Against, the Buffalo Bills, they give up their fair share of points to tight ends. But we didn't expect anything out of Noah Fant last week because, again, he was a guy that hadn't produced for so many weeks. The amount of points he had last week was more than, majority of his season. He hadn't had a touchdown since week 2. It really had been a little bit of a drought for him, but luckily he's back because the Los Angeles Chargers matchup is pretty favorable for him. Of course, Waller just went off against them, 9 catches, 150 and 1, but Noah Fant earlier this season had a pretty decent game against them in which he had 7 catches for 47 yards. If he's going to see more and more targets go in his direction, I certainly do think that he's going to be an effective fantasy play this week at the tight end position. We have Hayden Hurst as our number 11. The guys that we've been avoiding in the last couple of weeks, they're coming on strong as of late. Hayden Hurst coming off a performance of 4 catches, 21 yards, and a touchdown, playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, the Chiefs, I've mentioned it in multiple weeks. Back to back to back. You go back to anybody who's played against the Chiefs as of late in the prior weeks, I've said it. The Chiefs give up a bunch of points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller, 7 catches, 88 and a touchdown. Gronk, 6 catches, 106. Gesicki, 5 catches, 65 and 2. I know Jared Cook was a no-show this last week, but I do think that Hayden Hurst, because of the absence of a Julio Jones, will be the next receiving option after Calvin Ridley and a Russell Gage. I do think that he could find some productivity this week and or find some potential red zone opportunity that leads to his success. We have Dallas Goedert as our number 12. So here's the thing about Dallas Goedert. The amount of targets he's getting is great. 8 targets this last week, 4 catches, 39 yards. I'll take that. But against the Dallas Cowboys, I think that number even jumps higher because of how bad they've been against opposing tight ends this season. Just in the last couple weeks, Jordan Reed scored a touchdown. Of course, we've seen in the last 2 matchups that the Washington football team played against the Dallas Cowboys. In both games, Logan Thomas scored a touchdown. 4 catches, 20 yards and a touchdown. 4 catches, 60 yards and a touchdown. Eric Ebron recently, 3 catches, 22 yards and a touchdown against them. Tight ends definitely find success against the Cowboys. So again, I think Dallas Goedert certainly with Jalen Hurts under center. I know there is the opportunity for Jalen Hurts to throw the Zach Ertz, but I think Dallas Goedert is the number 1 as it currently stands and should be a pretty good play this week. We have Rob Gronkowski as my number 13. To be honest, Rob Gronkowski needs to score touchdowns and get a lot of yardage to be pretty relevant in these weeks. Again, if he scores a touchdown and gets only 1 receiving yard, it's not really going to be a big play. He needs to at least accumulate himself a touchdown along with 30 or 40 receiving yards and a couple grabs. That in itself, in my opinion, is going to be tough, as this team's probably going to just blow through the Detroit Lions, whether it's on the ground or through the air, through their main pieces, whether it's Godwin, AB, Evans, and then Leonard Fournette, who's probably going to score a couple times. So to be honest, when I look at Gronk and his potential productivity this week, there might not be a need to play Gronk. We could see more opportunity go to Cameron Brate like last week, and that in itself could hurt his overall value. I still think that he has a lot of upside because, again, he's always the guy that could catch 2 touchdowns out of nowhere. But as of right now, I rank him lower because, again, there's always other options in that offense that could be a threat to taking away some targets from him. Tyler Higbee is our next tight end this week as our number 14. So again, Tyler Higbee in the last 3 weeks has been getting better and better, has scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games, and is going against the Seattle Seahawks. We recently saw the Seattle Seahawks give up a bunch of points to Logan Thomas, 13 catches for 101 yards, and Dallas Goedert, 7 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown. We've seen Seattle struggle against opposing tight ends if, in fact, they are actually good and targeted at a pretty good volume. But the question remains, are we going to see that from Tyler Higbee with the potential of a Gerald Everett coming in and taking some targets away? I still think that regardless of that, he is going to be the red zone threat in terms of a receiving option outside of Robert Woods, because Cooper Kupp really doesn't find it there, and they could be running the ball a lot down there. But again, with the injuries to the running back position, it could be tough. I think Tyler Higbee, not a bad option as of right now. So to close out today's episode, I need to talk about 2 tight ends, specifically number 1, Evan Engram, and number 2, Jared Cook. These are 2 tight ends that, as of late, in my opinion, have been very volatile. I want to mention them mainly because, again, these are guys that I expect to have high upside. They could easily, on any given moment, have 5 catches, 50 yards, and make up a decent 7.5-point week in a fantasy football league. But if they end up scoring a touchdown, which they're both capable of doing, I think that they could end up having 10-plus point weeks. In comparison to the rest of the tight end field, which is even more volatile than they themselves, I think that there's a very good chance that Evan Engram and Jared Cook have themselves pretty good weeks this week. Again, I think they're both interchangeable. You could put 1 at 15, 1 at 16, but they're certainly lesser plays than anybody else that I've mentioned today based on recent performances. That being said, these are my top 16 tight end rankings for week 16 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Later this afternoon, we'll have our quarterback video, and until then, I'll see you guys. Have a beautiful Christmas. Happy holidays to all of you. I'll see you guys Saturday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, peace.